Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Amruti Borad and Jessica Taylor. Thanks for joining us today, Amruti and Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for having us all together.
Okay, you're very welcome. So by way of introduction, I connected the two of you for a few reasons. You're both in San Diego. You're both passionate about supporting physicians, and you're both really smart and warm and easy to talk to. So Amruti is a concierge family physician and a coach who emphasizes supporting medical students. And Amruti is a new mom. We have to mention that. And Jessica offers professional coaching and business development. She consults with physicians and clinicians who want to start a side business or work with the hospital. And Jessica offered me some terrific suggestions when we Zoomed, and it took us a while to get that to happen. And I'm so glad that we didn't give up because I loved our conversation.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So today we'll be talking about each of your paths to creating the unique ways that you support physicians and how you're currently involved in that space. And we might have Amruti speak a bit to the challenges that come with parenting when you're a professional mother as well. So as we get started, Amruti, what would you most like our audience to know about you?
Just that yes, I'm a new mom. So that has thrown a whole new perspective my way. And, I went through my own burnout journey, and I found a way to stay in medicine. And that's really what I focus on helping other people do. So I feel like there's always a path that you can take as long as you are willing to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. Thank you for sharing that. And Jessica, what would you like the audience to know about you?
Well, I love what you just shared, that there's always a path. That certainly has been my experience. I came from starting in healthcare administration in rural Colorado, and worked with hospitals and physicians across primarily the Western United States. But along that, I had a detour in the path and started working independently because I was finding that I was doing more mentoring and coaching in my regular duties rather than what my job responsibility had outlined. And so, this is what I've definitely found. Of course, as we're post-pandemic, a lot of people are looking at different pathways and different ways that they can pivot. And it is not an understatement to echo what Amruti said, that there's so many different pathways, and reaching out and looking for others who maybe have gone that path or who have resources is certainly one of the very first steps.
That's exactly right. And just what you said, resources, right? Finding people such as yourselves, right, that have resources for people to access. That's terrific, Jessica. So Amruti, would you like to tell us a little more about your journey and your path to where you're coaching physicians now?
Yeah, sure.
Med
So,
students, yeah.
yeah, I do. I coach both. And essentially, my path started in high school because I decided I wanted to be a physician. I had a lot of standardized test anxiety, so I decided to apply to some accelerated programs. And I knew that if I got into one of those programs, it was meant to be that I was going to go down the path of medicine. Um, so I got into a few different programs, and I chose one out here in Southern California. And I, had a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of self-doubt during college. During medical school, I had interviewed for medical school when I was 17 because that's the way the program worked. And so, of course, like, what do you know when you're that young? And of course, you're going to think that, you don't know what you're doing. And then when I entered medical school, I just happened to be younger than the majority or the average student. So a lot of these students already had a second career or families and just felt very out of place, lots of self-doubt. And, I also, throughout my medical school training, there were a lot of times where I felt like leaving, and it was always these transitional periods. And during my third year in medical school, I really considered leaving medicine, and I I would never do this, but I reached out to a mentor and I just sent an email, and they sent an email back, and they said, wait a minute, like, slow down. You're almost done. And I wanted to teach, and they said, you can teach, as a physician. And I just never thought of that.
Mhm.
You think about, like, it's only clinic or hospital.
Mhm.
And now I know it's so much more than that, of course, but at the time I didn't realize it. So I ended up staying the course, staying the path. I did my family medicine training at UCLA. I stayed in academics for I think like 4 or 5 years. I really enjoyed it. And then I moved to San Diego and I joined a practice that was primarily focused on taking care of patients. There was no teaching involved, which I really missed. So I would do intermittent, like, volunteer teaching. Um, and really it was the pandemic that led to my downfall. I feel like, my burnout, essentially. I had joined our acute COVID rapid response team for our university, and I felt like I was working every single day. And I was just, and it wasn't like I was necessarily seeing patients in person all the time, but it was a lot of calls, a lot of weekends, a lot of reassurance. And also, we didn't know much about the pandemic, so we ourselves didn't know much.
Right.
And so it just felt like, the burnout was building and building. And I started to decrease the amount that I was working on that team, decrease the hours. But there's a lot of guilt, in doing that. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'm okay. And I got promoted to be our clinic medical director and our wellness director for our department. Really enjoyed the work, but then the burnout came back, or maybe it never resolved. And it was just the patient volume and all these patients who had delayed their care coming in, and just so much responsibility, so much paperwork, so many meetings. And so I decided that I cannot do this anymore. And it was just a moment in my office where I was like, if I have to do one more thing, I don't know if I can. And so in the middle of all that, I had discovered there was a physician coach in my department. And I connected with them and I started coaching with them. And they really showed me that, even though I thought about leaving medicine entirely for probably a month or so, they really showed me that I wanted to stay in medicine, that I enjoy seeing patients. I just needed to find a new way, or needed to do less of it. So I had considered, so I went part-time for a short period of time. And then my department, we weren't able to stay part-time. So I resigned. And then I had the opportunity to go into concierge medicine. So I ended up going into that practice. And I've never looked back. I think it's a great way to practice medicine, a lot more time with patients. We have very good support from our advanced practice providers. And it's just so much more manageable. And because a physician coach helped me so much, I decided to certify myself through the life coach school, which is very cognitive behavioral therapy based. And that's why I really liked it. And so since doing that, I work one-on-one with medical students or physicians who might be going through the same thing as I did. And also, especially for students, it's these transitional periods, the overwhelm of volume. How do you manage your life and your work at the same time? Really helping them with that sort of thing. And with physicians, it's okay, if you're thinking about leaving, here are a few other things that you could think about before you do that, because you have so many options.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all of that. There's so much to unpack there, and so many physicians. I'm grateful that they're willing to talk about the things that you just shared. And I say so many times, every time a doctor shares their story, another doctor feels less alone. And whether it's the imposter syndrome and the trouble with transitions and the guilt and all the meetings and all of that, there's a lot to unpack there. So thank you, Amruti. And Jessica, would you like to share some about your journey to how you've developed into what you're doing assisting physicians?
Yeah, I think that there's some common themes. I think that this is something that impacts a lot of people in healthcare. Healthcare as an industry is so administrative intensive that that's not the care that burns people out. It's the the administrative and regulatory environment that I think adds a burden to people's everyday life that work in healthcare. That certainly was my experience also. I said, I came to healthcare administration. It wasn't unlike Amruti, which I love hearing when people have a passion that they developed and learned and fostered early in life. Healthcare administration was something that I hadn't thought I would be. I originally wanted to be a physical therapist, so on the clinical side. But my mom was working as an administrator at the hospital in the tertiary hospital and part of a health system. And so I got to experience it from her, coming home with, stories about what the kind of work that she was doing. And so when somebody was on administrative maternity leave, sorry, not administrative leave, on maternity leave, I just started as temporary work with her company. Her CFO actually hired me at the time. And that turned into an MBA in healthcare administration. And 10 years later, I had a stint at the Mayo Clinic, and that's what brought me out to California. I had family that was originally from here, and it had always been a part of my plan to be here. And so it was a wonderful opportunity between working for a world-class institution like the Mayo Clinic and also being on the West Coast. And so I loved my time at the Mayo Clinic, and it was the administration work. And I was traveling a lot, and that's tough when you're in your younger years, like youngest years in your 20s and like early 30s. It's a great time to have a traveling job. But start getting into your mid 30s, you kind of want to set down roots. And so I went back to work in a leadership role at my previous company with my mom. And then that's when I found coaching. I was leading a lot of peer networks, and I was facilitating meetings that were with hospital department directors, VPs, and CEOs. And one of the HR directors pulled me aside, and she's like, some of the things that you're doing facilitating these meetings is a lot of coaching. As leading with curiosity, letting people discover and uncover their issues themselves, brainstorm their own solutions, and then help facilitate that. So when I had opportunity to be able to go out independent, I did in 2018. And then during the pandemic, I was actually doing a lot of caregiving for my dad, who was terminally ill at the time. And but that did allow me to be able to get my coach training, and I did that through a boutique coach training company called Healthcare Coaching Institute. Worked with a wonderful cohort of people that included physicians that were getting their coach certification, and other people who were working within the healthcare industry, including pharma, medical device sales, just across the board. And so that is kind of what has led me today. So now I'm blending all of my business development experience, the sales experience, and coaching, all in the interest of helping solve or be part of the solution. I say solve is a big word, but be part of the solutions of helping healthcare be a better place to work.
Right. Well, and I love that. And that's what I tried to emphasize on this podcast is hope for physicians, right? And that there is and as you're both saying it, Amruti said, that there's so many options that you have. Amruti, what would you like to speak to about your coaching experience with physicians and medical students?
Yeah, so Jessica, I love how you just fell into this whole career just by covering while someone was on maternity leave. That's great. It's just funny how things happen. And I love your description of what coaching is, because a lot of people, don't recognize that. It's really, collaborating with people, like you said, allowing them to come up with their solution, that they have that wisdom within themselves, and then getting clear on what their goals are. So with students, I noticed that, I talk a lot about mindset, but with students, oftentimes they feel like mindset has nothing to do with it, but it really has everything to do with it. So I really like to teach how do you actually think about things? How can you change those thoughts to develop a better belief system for yourself, and how that applies to everything that you're doing, especially with like time management. because there's just so much volume, there's so much coming at you. And, I had this experience where I just felt like in the first few months of medical school, I could not, get on, I was basically felt like I was sinking or drowning. So doing a lot about time management, and then making sure that they are aware of the different paths that you can take in medicine. So one, it's really important to focus on, studying, and because that's what's going to get you to that degree, and that degree is what's going to help you help people the way you want to. So, sometimes people get lost and they're trying to do too many different things, but making studying one of your time priorities, and making sure that you're communicating, collaborating with other students, having like that peer support is really important. Being on social media, there's of course ups and downs of doing that, or good sides and bad sides, but focusing on the positive, which is, creating a social media profile that's a professional profile on LinkedIn or whatever you're comfortable with, and then sharing what your journey is, sharing things that you've dealt with, and how you can help somebody else. And you don't have to wear your entire heart on your sleeve, but just sharing these little difficulties and challenges you might have, because as you said, once one person starts sharing, other people will share, and then you're not alone. So really relying on those networks, and those networks help you find mentors. And mentors is how you learn about the different ways you can practice medicine, or the different ways that you can impact our patient populations. So just knowing that there's, it's not just clinic and hospital. You can go into like the administrative side. You can go into, building your own private practice. You can work part-time. You don't have to work full-time. You can be an expert witness. You can be a coach like Jessica and I are doing. And, just understanding that the whole goal of medical school is to become adaptable. So you're always going to learn a new skill. I mean, I know I have like friends who are ER doctors who now prescribe weight loss medicines. Like no one knew about that before, right? And you wouldn't expect to do that as an ER physician. So just knowing that the more adaptable you are, the more flexible you are, the more open-minded you are, you're going to find, a path for that. A lot of people go into lifestyle medicine, or now because of AI, they're going on the tech side of things, working with medical device companies. There's just so much that you can do. So just keeping that adaptable, open mind, realizing that any challenges that you might face are just opportunity to grow and be better. And then knowing that, you're on your own path. It's very hard not to compare yourself to other people, but maybe looking at other people's successes as a way to learn from them. For students, it's like, how are you in the top 10% of our class? How is that? How did you get there? And for physicians, it might be, how are you feeling fulfilled in your current practice, or whatever it is that you've chosen to do. So it's the same thing for physicians as well. I mean, for us as physicians, you leave medical school just so excited. It's like, yes, I'm finally a doctor. I can do my own thing. And then you just start to notice that there's so many things you never learned in medical school, like the financial side, billing, coding, even like teaching patients about diet and exercise. We get like one class, like one lecture on nutrition, right? And then what about your student loans? Oh, now I have to start repaying my student loans. A lot of people defer. And so we don't get that financial education. So a lot of it is addressing medical school curriculum to better train our residents and physicians. But then you start taking care of patients, and you realize that so much of what you do is about building relationships, and not necessarily like your clinical skills are vital, but so much of it is building this relationship with people, and learning how to have boundaries in your workplace, whether it is with patients or colleagues or your boss, and essentially learning how to say no when you're being asked to do too many things, and really learning how to utilize teams and work in teams to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, which is ultimately, taking care of yourself and taking care of your patients.
Right. Well, thank you. And all that is so important. And some of the things you were specifically referring to for med students is also important and valuable for attending physicians, like even building a professional website or just a brand, because they said even if you don't think you have a personal brand, you do. Like when people come to see you, that's your
Yeah.
brand. So just somehow on social media, instead of letting your hospital be your only media outlet, right, for whatever they're putting out, they don't own you basically, and that you can brand yourself, right? And then even peer support, that doctors need peer support no matter what point they are in their career. So that was all fantastic, Amruti. Thank you. And what does that bring up for you, Jessica?
Oh my gosh, I just have so many questions for Rudy, and I'm just thinking about who all the people that you talk with, Kim, because I know that there's a lot of, and this is who comes to me and asking questions. A lot of physicians who want to start coaching on the or to access coaching. I think maybe if we could start there, question I have for you is, when a lot of physicians are asking, how is it that they can access coaching? A lot of them are very concerned that it may impact their license or being reported within their organization. How is it that you were able to access coaching when you were in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never had a physician be concerned about the coaching being reported. I know, like with therapy, I never thought about that. But actually, I was concerned about that. When I started doing all the wellness work for our department, I just received a message from a physician in a clinic in our department that I wasn't really that familiar with at the time. And they mentioned, oh, have you thought about coaching or as a resource to share with the department? And I said, no, I mean, I've heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. And then I just met with her in private, and I was so worried because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't have my boss find out,
Yeah.
is this confidential? I don't understand. But when we met, I understood what it was a lot better. And, I realized everything is confidential. As long as, same thing as with therapy, as long as you're not trying to hurt yourself or someone else, or, or not in imminent danger. And that it's really just a way to kind of like put your mind on paper, or just like get someone else's input in terms of, okay, maybe you're not thinking about this like the way that would really help you, like that way that would really serve you. So with my coach, I did a lot of that thought work. I did a lot of boundary setting. And, you know, to this day, I'm the one that mentioned, oh yeah, she was my coach. Like she's always been like very private, and, I won't say anything unless you want me to. So there should be no fear about being reported for coaching. And sometimes, that's a good place to start. Like, even if someone knows they're severely depressed, but they're afraid to go to therapy, go to coaching, and they'll tell you, like, hey, maybe you should go to therapy, right?
Mhm.
And you can do both at the same time. And there's plenty of organizations actually that do free physician coaching or free coaching. And that's all, I only learned about that through social media.
Yeah, I think you made an important point there that you can be in coaching and therapy at the same time. And I think that that's one of the aspects that was important about coach training, was learning the difference between therapy and coaching. And the distinguishing between the two was pathologies, or what's treated in therapy, that clinical depression or anxiety or any of those other uh, anything that's having the impact wellness of being is really appropriate for therapy, and anything that is vocational or leadership aspects or goal setting and things like that is really a great setting to work with a coach. And I'm so glad to hear that you had access to that, and I love how you shared that it's really something that's approachable for many people, and it's a good place to start. It's a really, really great place to start. That certainly has been my experience with, working with coaching, and the clients that come to me are typically physicians that have an idea for other ways to help other physicians, their colleagues, their peers, I love hearing about how you're helping students, and that is really an important population that does need access to coaching. They need a space to be able to talk about both their personal and their professional life. And, I know as a new mother that is something that students at that age, and when they're in their late 20s, early 30s, that's something that they're really thinking about, is how to balance their professional life, which is really demanding. And it's 24/7. It's a business that doesn't close. And so how do you manage having a family when you have that? And so that is certainly one of the topics that people approach coaching for. Something else is that, yeah, they have an idea that they want to start something on the side. And so they don't want to leave practice, but they're trying to figure out how it is that they could start doing something, perhaps coaching or a different kind of consulting, something like that is maybe one of their passion projects, topics that they're not able to do within their current organization. Also work with coaching on how to approach their current organization. If they want to provide something within their current hospital or practice, what are ways that they can approach the leadership or other parts of their team to be able to maybe start a new offering, professional development or personal development. So these are a lot of things that, like, the evolution of medicine right now, that's really exciting. I mean, just being able to be, part of, AI developments and other aspects of, how can we use these technologies in ways that help support the in-person care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all of that, Jessica. And I have to say that you have a lot of wonderful resources, and I had never heard of like Ikigai. Is that how you pronounce it, right?
It is.
And finding your purpose and just all those things that you share with me when we had our conversation. I was like, frantically taking notes because you have so many resources to share. So yeah, thank you. And as before we start to wind down, Amruti, would you like to share a little bit about the challenges that come with parenting when you're a professional mother?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I could talk about that for a lifetime. But I just wanted to mention, Jessica, I like that you mentioned training leaders or either coaching leaders or having leaders get coach training, because that's really important because it trickles down to the rest of the organization. Um, but yeah, I think it's just hard. I think it's very, like, parenting is very humbling. I think it's really important for workplaces to have a very good maternity leave policy, proper paid leave. I felt very lucky that I was able to have mostly paid leave of some kind for almost 5 months. Um, and that really helped me be able to stay and really adapt to being a new parent. And I can't imagine having left her earlier than that. So that's one thing. The other thing is having a flexible workplace. So are you able to go part-time, or if you're doing part-time work, do you have a team that's helping you, when you're not there? And I feel lucky that I was already part-time for a year before I had my daughter. And so that's allowed me to stay at home. And then, figuring out your childcare. So, are you going to do nanny or daycare? It's always everybody's question, and it's really different for every family, financially versus, if the baby gets sick, who's going to pick them up? When do you want them to start socializing? So really just thinking about your childcare plan before you're going to go back to work, and know that it's okay that it changes. And I think one of the biggest things is just really is a lot of time management. It's just figuring out, like, okay, what are my priorities now? And oftentimes, at least for me, my family has become the priority. And then, work. So it's these two big priorities. And so, like, really trying to focus when I'm at work, like, that's what I'm there for. And then when I'm home, I really try to disconnect as much as possible. I think that's really important. And then just knowing when to ask for help, whoever it may be from. Um, I think peer support in the sense of, like, mom Facebook groups, or just knowing other mothers and talking to other parents, and knowing, anybody that's willing to help, like, just accepting that you need help, you need that break, and you want to be a role model for your own children, that you're essentially taking care of yourself so that you can take really good care of them.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's great. Accepting help is a really big one. I agree. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that, Jessica, or anything else you'd like to talk about with coaching?
Yeah, I think with, working with clients who are, parents is like Amruti was saying, determining the safety net, we brainstorm a lot about who's in the network and who can reach out to, how to develop those resources. It really does. I know that the saying comes up often, but it really does take the village, and certainly, in communities with high cost of living and if access to daycare and nannies is an issue, exploring all the different avenues and, love, the aspect of mom groups in different ways, either through social media, community groups, through the organizations. I was just really encouraged this morning. I saw a post by a physician that is a consultant now, and he was just attending the American College of Healthcare Executives annual conference. And, workforce shortage is always a hot topic. And he said, let's look at it in a different way. And here's the conversations that I just heard at Congress is, how can we help support families in different ways and young families, and not just talk about like on-site daycare? Are there other ways that we can, creative working arrangements, like you're saying, flexibility? Can we help cover shifts? Other ways. Can we start fostering that in medical school and nursing school, rather than trying to just throw, money at the issue when that's not really what is helping? Like on-site daycare is one aspect. But like you said, what if people are sick? What if it's full, et cetera? Like, brainstorming these other ways that can help the helpers.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's fantastic that they're having these
Yeah.
conversations. That's really heartening to hear about that. So this has been fantastic, and I'd love to know how our listeners can get in touch with both of you, and I'll put your links in our show notes and when I share this on LinkedIn. So, Amruti, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just going to my website, which is vorsisphysiciancoaching.com, and it has free resources on there. And also it has links to the different social media outlets that I'm on. LinkedIn is an easy one to get in touch with me as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. And how about you, Jessica?
Yeah, my website is coachingcoalition.com. And I am posting resources there. And then also I'm very active on LinkedIn and share tips almost every Tuesday and Thursday for the most part. And my handle there is Taylor Jessica L. Because Jessica Taylor, there could be a lot, but Taylor Jessica L.
Fantastic. So my tip is I wasn't seeing people's posts, and my good friend Charity Hicks just helped me right before we got on this call. Is that I had clicked on people's notification bells, but now there's some new thing, and there's like 2 bells. So if you aren't getting notifications for people, if you go and click on it, what I thought I was getting every post, it only says most relevant. And if you want all, you double click on it, and then I think you see 2 bells. So I will go when we're off of this call, and I will go click on your notification bells to make sure that I see all of your posts.
Same, good tip.
You learn something new every day.
Exactly. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear from anyone. And please click like, share, and subscribe. And I've got many more great guests to come. So thanks again for being my guest today, Jessica and Amruti. I really loved our conversation, and I think it'll help a lot of people.
Thank you, Kim. It was nice to meet you, Jessica.
Wonderful to meet you too, Amruti. And thank you so much, Kim, for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. So in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices, and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.